Appeal Court clears Taraba State All Progressives Congress governorship candidate. Court terminates all charges filed by the EFCC against late former Chief of Defense Staff Alex Bade. In international news, Trump's former campaign boss Manafort sentenced to 47 months. And in sports, the Tigers will know group opponents for this year's FIBA World Cup in March.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. President Muhammadu Buhari is now in his hometown, Daura, in Katsina State, ahead of tomorrow's governorship and state assembly elections. President Buhari arrived on Thursday with his aides and close family members. The president was received by the Emir of Daura, Farouk Umar, his kinsmen, and hundreds of well-wishers. Later today, the president's wife, Aisha Buhari, is scheduled to host a Thanksgiving dinner for women and youth organizations in the city. One person died on Thursday while scores were injured as supporters of the All Progressives Congress and the Allied People's Movement clashed in the local government area of Ogun State. APC had organized the rally day for ahead of tomorrow's election, but it turned bloody when supporters of the Allied People's Movement reportedly hit and killed one APC supporter with their vehicle. Eyewitnesses say this triggered violence as supporters of both parties engaged in a free-for-all, which led to scores from both sides sustaining various degrees of injuries. Ogun State Police Public Relations Officer Bimbola Oyeyemi said 10 suspects have been arrested in connection with the crisis. To court matters, the Court of Appeal has cleared APC governorship candidate Sani Danladi to participate in Saturday's governorship election in Taraba State. The court in Yola granted a stay of execution of an order of the Federal High Court in Jalingo and an order barring INEC and others from implementing the High Court judgment. ANN News earlier reported how the High Court disqualified Danladi on Wednesday after he was found culpable of age falsification. Danladi is one of major opponents of incumbent Taraba State Governor Darius Ishaku of the People's Democratic Party. A River State Chief Magistrate Court in Port Harcourt has issued a warrant for the arrest of Nsima Ekere, governorship candidate of the All Progressives Congress in Akwa Ibom State. The court ordered Ekere's arrest in compliance with Section 138 of River State's 2015 Administration of Criminal Justice Law. The court order, bearing the seal and signature of St. Dapa, Principal Registrar of the court, said the arrest warrant against Ekere and Meljango was issued in Port Harcourt under the seal of the court and hand of the presiding Chief Justice on Tuesday. An Abuja division of the Federal High Court has terminated charges filed by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, against the late former Chief of Defense Staff, Alex Bade, who was killed last year by gunmen when returning from his farm in Nasarawa State. Yalika Nigeria Limited, the company that was standing trial with Bade, was found guilty of the charges. The court ordered that all properties of the company, in line with a 10-count amended charge, be forfeited to the federal government through the EFCC. And ahead of tomorrow's election, Deji of Akure Land, Oba Alade Toyibo Alade Lucy, has threatened to invoke the spirit of the ancestors on politicians and suspected thugs who perpetrate violence. Ondo State Police Command had vowed to deal ruthlessly and prosecute anyone who flouts the 12-hour restriction of movement across the state. Oba Alade Lucy gave the warning at a meeting with leaders of political parties where he cautioned politicians against instigating violence during and after the exercise. The Ondo monarch also urged the security agencies to be alive to their responsibilities in fishing out potential criminals and ensuring that there is adequate security coverage during the election. The senator representing Kaduna Central, Senator Shehu Sani, says he agrees with President Muhammadu Buhari that the People's Democratic Party should explain how it allegedly squandered almost $600 billion during its 16 years in power. Sani had previously advised PDP to recall all past and present members from 1999 to 2015 to prepare for probes. The senator had posted on his Twitter handle that the opposition People's Democratic Party should prepare a full report for the nation explaining what he called such a monumental waste. And as the world marks International Women's Day, stakeholders have urged the federal government to enact policies that will ensure an increase in the number of women in decision-making positions across the country. The group says it regrets they currently lack the number for representation and voice to push through, as democracy is a game of numbers. They also urge women to remain resilient in their quest for a balanced society and not hastily forget the focus of this year's celebration. This year's theme is Balanced for Better, as an avenue for women to continuously participate in active politics and governance. Among them were National Coordinator, Virtuous Women and Youth Initiative, Esther Akwa, founder, Voice for Led Privileged Organization, Dr. Ego Queen Izuma, legal practitioners and politicians. These women say there is an urgent need to galvanize, strategize and impress it on President Muhammadu Buhari in his second tenure to do his best in appointment of women. They said the recently held National Assembly elections was the worst showing for Nigerian women since 2007. Coming up, African stories, 5 counties back in Gatia for Trade Chamber top seats. And later, international news, Trump former campaign boss Manafort sentenced to 47 months in prison.
You are watching ANN.
Looking for some Disney magic but don't know where to find it? We've got a magical solution just for you. Simply go to disneynigeria.mobi and get an exciting selection of games, short videos, wallpapers, shareables, and more. Explore a whole new world of Disney on your mobile, tablet, or PC. For just 200 Naira monthly, you get to enjoy the fun to infinity and beyond. SMS Disney to 11006 to begin. Terms and conditions apply. This service is only available to MTN customers.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to African stories. South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters Party, EFF, says it has fully denounced the new whites-only settlement, Eureka, which has been established by Adrian Aletus Ilwit, whom the EFF describes as the racist. EFF says rights and the fight against racial discrimination have been violated by the setting up of such a settlement. The party says South Africa has experienced several racial attacks, especially in the Northern Cape, where people are still treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. EFF spokesman in the Northern Cape, Obakeng Lechutu, says everyone should remember that whites are not the only ones facing challenges such as crime, corruption and non-delivery of services. Lechutu says EFF will continue to advocate and advance for land expropriation without compensation for equal redistribution. Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry will hold its elections in May, and delegates from 5 counties in Mount Kenya region have thrown their support behind Richard Ngatia. Kiambu, Morang, Kiriaga, Urandaria and Yeri counties are backing Ngatia, who is running for the Chamber's president's position. He is currently KNCCI Nairobi chapter chairman. The delegates said they support Ngatia because of what he has done in the Nairobi chapter. Ngatia says KNCCI is a pillar in creating an enabling business environment both locally and internationally, and that the chamber would want all business to have a competitive edge in local, regional and international business. So far, 3 contestants have expressed interest in running for the post of president. Econet founder Strive Masiyiwa is the only Zimbabwean on this year's Forbes Black Billionaires list. Forbes report shows Masiyiwa is worth about $2.5 billion. Nigeria and the USA top the list with 4 billionaires each, while Zimbabwe, Angola, South Africa, Canada and Britain have 1 each. Nigeria tops the list with Aliko Dangote, who is worth about $11 billion. Nigeria's first female billionaire, Folorunsho Lakija, Oprah Winfrey of the U.S. and the oldest daughter of Angola's former president, Isabel dos Santos, are the world's only black female billionaires. And back in Zimbabwe, the family of a teacher is grieving today as two of her children, 3 and 5 years old, have drowned in a pit latrine. Police spokesperson in Masvingo, Inspector Jarity Mazula, confirmed the incident and urged parents to closely monitor their children to avoid this type of unnecessary loss of life. Police say on that day, the children were left at home in the custody of their father, who went to a shop after some time, leaving the children playing around the homestead. The mother later returned home to find the children drowned in the pit toilet, which had been filled with water from heavy rains that recently inundated the area. The former water minister Samuel Sipepa Nkomo had said in 2012 that at least half of the population living in rural areas defecates in the bush or use crude forms of toilets. He said this exposed them to diarrhea, diseases and the dangers of falling in. An Egyptian actor, Amri Waked, has told German broadcaster Deutsche Welle Egyptian embassy in Madrid had unofficially informed him the military courts have convicted him of spreading fake news and insulting the states. The 45-year-old Egyptian actor, known for his roles in Syriana, Lucy and the Netflix Marco Polo, currently lives in Europe. He's a well-known critic of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's government. The two sentences amount to an 8-year prison term. Waked also says an official embassy notice to him says his Egyptian passport could only be renewed if he personally returns to Egypt for the process. A retired Egyptian intelligence official, Mohammed Rashid, says this is not the first time Waked has made public statements against the government of Egypt. He said Waked had been warned before now. A show on Cameroon television that featured a demonstration of how a man could physically abuse his wife has sparked outrage and calls for an end to impunity in a country where violence against women runs high. Ernest Obama, the show's presenter on the privately owned Vision 4 channel, demonstrated how to, quote, calm a woman by squeezing her neck. A Cameroonian activist said Obama's comments on the show last week contributed to a culture in which violence against women was seen as acceptable. Renata spokeswoman Kathy Abba Fuda says violence is not just sexual, it is also physical, moral, economic, but it starts with words. Renata is a network of more than 20,000 volunteers who help victims of sexual abuse and violence rebuild their lives. When we return, international news. Trump former campaign boss Manafort sentenced to 47 months in prison. And later, sport. The Tigers will know the group opponents for this year's FIBA World Cup in March.
You are watching ANN.
This used to be me. But that was before I got the perfect bag. It's handy and easy to use. All I need in one compact space, just like my MTN Extra Value plan. I used to get one plan for my calls and then try to remember which data plan worked for me. Roaming was a totally different ballgame. Not anymore. I've got the MTN Extra Value all-in-one plan. If you're a data buff like me, you get extra data with some talk time. And if you like to make calls, you get extra talk time with some data. And when I'm abroad, I automatically browse, chat, and call right on the same plan. MTN Extra Value was made just for me.
More of data or calls, whichever one you prefer. MTN Extra Value is made just for you.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to stories from around the world. The Malaysian government has been criticized by domestic and international human rights groups for detaining 4 Egyptians critical of Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi with the intention of extraditing them to Egypt where they may be executed. Lawyers for Liberty Executive Director Latifa Koya said Malaysia has deported 4 Egyptians who may face extradition or rather execution by the military regime in Egypt. They further said this was done secretly, flouting international human rights standards. They also said the 4 Egyptians are members of jailed former President Mohamed Morsi's party. They say the 4 are being persecuted for their political beliefs. Al Jazeera had reported that the Malaysian Foreign Ministry official had confirmed on Friday that the 4 Egyptians had been detained in an operation by Immigration Department and the Special Branch. U.S. President Donald Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, was sentenced on Thursday to nearly 4 years in prison for tax and bank fraud related to his work advising Ukrainian politicians. This sentence is much less than what was called for under sentencing guidelines. Manafort had no visible reaction to the 47-month sentence as he sat in a wheelchair because of complication from gout. This is yet the longest sentence to date to come from Special Counsel Robert Mueller's probe. It could have been much worse for Manafort. Sentencing guidelines call for a 20-year term, which could have effectively been a life sentence for the 69-year-old. Manafort has been jailed since June last year, so he will get credit for the 9 months he has already served. Srinagar, Indian officials say police have arrested at least 300 activists seeking the end of Indian rule in disputed Kashmir. This has escalated fears among already wary residents that a sweeping crackdown could touch off renewed anti-India protests and clashes. The crackdown comes amid high tensions between India and Pakistan following the suicide car bombing of a paramilitary convoy by a Kashmiri militant. 40 Indian soldiers died in a mid-February attack, the worst against Indian government forces in Kashmir's history. Police said on Saturday they went to a neighborhood overnight and rounded up top leaders and activists of mainly Jamaat-e-Islami, a political religious group that espouses the right to self-determination for the Himalayan territory. Kashmir is divided between India and Pakistan, but both countries claim it in its entirety. Most Kashmiris support the rebels' demand that the territory be united either under Pakistani rule or as an independent country. They also participate in a street protest against India control. As the debate continues over how Western countries should deal with citizens who have gone abroad to join ISIS, Iraqi President Barhan Salih says foreigners tried in Iraq for fighting with a militant group could be sentenced to death. The president was quoted in an Abu Dhabi newspaper saying the ISIS fighters will be tried in accordance with Iraqi law and may be sentenced to death if found guilty of killing Iraqis. The Iraqi military has said U.S.-backed forces in Syria handed over nearly 300 Iraqi and foreign suspected ISIS members last month. Many more are expected under an agreement to transfer 500 detainees held by U.S.-backed forces in Syria. The government has said it does not expect to have to deal with all ISIS fighters transferred from Syria. Philippine Red Cross chairman Richard Gordon says more people have died from measles in the country this year than in all of last year. He said the epidemic is worsened by low vaccine confidence. Children in the Philippines are said to be a serious risk as more than 260 persons have died, most of them under 5 years old. The World Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent societies say the spread of measles has been on the rise in the Philippines in recent years because of many reasons, including low vaccination rates across the country. The Philippines Red Cross Society is collaborating with the country's health department to roll out a massive social mobilization campaign across 7 of the hardest hit regions to provide vaccination and raise awareness in an effort to contain the outbreak. Many of the local hospitals are overwhelmed, so the Red Cross has set up 7 measles care units to help with the clinical management and medical care of highly contagious patients. Up next, sports. The Tigers will know the group opponents for this year's FIBA World Cup in March. Stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Adam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby.
We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward.
Wait, stop.
You okay, lean to your right. Keep walking down. Keep walking to the left. Yes.
You're almost here.
Keep going.
You are here. Wow, you did it.
I'm just so glad I didn't have to use my cane to do this.
And I am so glad no other man got you before me. Let me be your eyes.
We will never stop working to give you a network you can rely on so you can enjoy life's special moments. MTN, everywhere you go.
Welcome back. This is CNN News. In sports, the Tigers will know their group opponents at the 2019 FIBA Basketball World Cup in China when the draw for the competition holds in Shenzhen in a week. The tournament is scheduled for late August in 8 Chinese cities. The team will be making their third appearance after a 12-year absence since 2006. Meanwhile, host nation China and USA, Spain, France, Serbia, Argentina, Lithuania and Greece have all been announced by the Federation of International Basketball Associations as top seeds. The Tigers of Nigeria will have to hope for a favorable draw. Lionel Messi was named in the Argentina squad on Thursday for the first time since the World Cup ending a self-imposed 8-month exile. Interim coach Lionel Scaloni named the 5-time World Player of the Year in his squad for this month's friendly against Venezuela and Morocco. The 31-year-old Barcelona star hasn't pulled on the light blue and white national team jersey since Argentina were dumped out of the World Cup last June by France, the eventual winners. That is any news this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on this and other stories, visit the website annafrica.net. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CNN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a great evening.